Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pitchside Perspective podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Sharples, and joining me as usual is the wisdom of the podcast, Mr. Jack Collazar. In this episode, we're talking transfers. With just a week left to go of the window, we're diving into the excitement and the drama of the Premier League transfer window. We'll be breaking down the key moves, some missed opportunities, and what your club needs to do to ensure a successful season. Whether it's strengthening the back line, finding that clinical striker, or breaking the bank for a superstar. The final days of the window could make or break your team's campaign. Join us as we analyse the latest rumours, the potential signings, and what to expect before the window slams shut. Talking about superstars, Jack, how are you, mate?
Oh yeah, that's me. Good. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm so happy the Premier League's back, and I basically sat on my backside all weekend and watched every game.
Yeah, I got a few in, got little bits in. Thought it was good. No great surprises, I don't think. But still a good start to the season.
Yeah, no, it was good to watch it, and obviously we were treated to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday games, so 4 days of Premier League, and yeah, definitely back with a bang. And some of our predictions from last week are definitely out the window already, I think, and some people are probably listening back, going, "What were they talking about?"
Early days, lots of soccer to be played.
Any games in particular really stand out for you?
Not particularly. I thought obviously Liverpool looked very good. I think Chelsea. Don't want to read too much into that. Getting beat against Man City, I would be panicking if I was them. But Man City will certainly be the one of the happier teams, having a tough fixture away at Stamford Bridge to open the season and coming away with a pretty comfortable 2-0 win in the end. So nothing stands out. Like I said, no great surprises. I think Leicester in the second half, at least, off a period, showed what they're going to need to do to stay up, which is kind of really turn up the kind of like the passion and the intensity and energy. And they did that against Tottenham and a draw. So that's a good result for them. Um, so yeah, no one stands out, but still a good start.
Jamie Vardy's having another party. I do love what he did as soon as he scored that goal. He pointed over to the Premier League badge on his sleeve and gave it to Tottenham fans, saying, "You've never won this, and I've won one." Gotta love that from Vardy, and I think he just goes down in history as a legend of the game, not only for his ability, but just his housery that he has every week, and you got to respect it.
Yeah, and I think that will help Leicester kind of just getting the fans on board, riling them up a little bit, creating a good atmosphere, sees mentality and all of that. And he's a good person to lead the way with that stuff.
No, definitely, definitely. And before we kick off this episode all about transfers, obviously it's your turn to ask me a question. So fire away.
Yeah, keeping it on the opening weekend theme. So there are 7 players that have scored 7 goals or more on Premier League opening weekends. Can you name those 7 players?
Oof, that's a tough one. Um, I'm trying to
We'll say the
cast my
over
mind.
under of 4.5 over under, I think.
Yeah, it's out of seven. I reckon I can probably get a couple to start with that have already popped in my head, and then it might turn into a guessing game and a hit and hope. But I'll have a little think, and as usual, we'll come back at the end and see if maybe I'm the wisdom of the podcast, but we'll doubt it. But we'd love to see before we do get started as well. We have another new segment coming to the podcast. The segment
Nice.
is an idea from Jack, and I'm very excited for it. It is going to be Jack's 60-second EFL breakdown.
Yeah, we decided to give some love to the lower leagues. I know there's a lot of listeners who don't necessarily support a Premier League team, so we're going to do 60 seconds max roundup. Ready? All right, so this week's EFL roundup starts in League Two, where Bromley, who are in the EFL for the first time in their history, have made a cracking start to the season. And after a 2-0 home win against the Wombles of Wimbledon, are one of only 3 teams with a 100% record in the division, the others being Walsall and Gillingham. Accrington, Stanley and Harrogate played out a thrilling 3-3 draw, and the Class of 92 will be concerned that Salford have not scored a league goal yet after a 0-0 draw away at Bradford City. In League One, of course, the mighty Huddersfield Town secured a 2-1 win versus Andrew, friend of the podcast, Brody Broadbent's team, Stevenage. Stockport are early leaders at the top of the table after a 3-0 win against Blackpool, backing up a 2-0 win against Cambridge. Wrexham have made a steady start with 1 win and 1 draw. In the Championship, Burnley looked favourites for promotion after a 5-0 win against Cardiff. Leeds got another draw at West Brom. Wayne Rooney's Plymouth Argyle got their first point of the season, and Millwall, Preston and Cardiff are the only teams yet to get a point on the board in the league. That completes your EFL roundup for this week.
I love it. Dropping in some knowledge from the lower leagues. As you said, it's not all Premier League. We do like to mix it up. So each week, Jack will be giving us a short report on the scores around the grounds and the latest news. So Jack, love that. And obviously a big shout out to my local side, Bromley, 2 wins from 2. So a great start for them in their journey as a professional club now in the EFL. But let's get started on transfers. I don't know about you, but I love transfer deadline day, and a week to go. Obviously, this podcast comes out Friday, and the deadline closes on a following Friday. I think it's going to be interesting. I think the window has been somewhat quiet. If you think about the big teams, like the top 5-6 teams, have been somewhat quiet, and I think maybe 1 or 2 transfers could come in and really blow it out of the water. But I think we go through the teams, we kind of see what they've done, what they need to do, have they done good business, bad business, and go from there. So I think alphabetical order, starting with the Gunners, with Arsenal. What do you think, Jack?
Interesting one. Obviously, shored up the defence a little bit, which was already strong. But I think if they can really kind of make that defence the best in the league, that's going to give them a chance to catch City. At the other end of the team, though, I think it's been a number of years now that people have been crying out for them to buy a striker, someone who's going to score 25 goals a year. They still haven't. And maybe that tells you that Arteta doesn't think it's necessary, or maybe they're just struggling to get one over the line. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a funny one, right? Because, like you said, Arsenal fans and general public have been crying out, Arsenal need a striker, need a striker. And then they go and sign, obviously, Kai Havertz the other year. And I think his signing got bashed a little bit, but I think he's kind of turned his doubters around. And I think he's been a very successful signing there and has proved to pop up with the goals as a number 9 when it really matters. So I think the question mark really is over, do they actually need a striker? Or if they go and sign a striker, the way Arsenal play, is that going to kill the space in the penalty box for their midfield players to run into? Because the one thing I do admire with Arsenal is they get goals from midfield. Saka, Trossard. I think Trossard ended up on like 12, 13 goals last year. Odegaard pops up with it. So yes, I think a striker is 100% going to help them in terms of just taking a bit of pressure off the midfield. But then if they have a focal point that is always going to be in the penalty box, is that going to take away the space for those midfield runs to come in? What do you reckon?
No, I think it's a good point. Maybe Arteta just has faith in Havertz. What I would say is 1 or 2 injuries, to a Havertz or to an Odegaard, maybe to a Saliba, one of their key players. Then I think that'll be the big test. Do they have the players to come in and not skip a beat? But that's a test for any team. But if you look at Man City, no Rodri, no problem at the weekend. So maybe squad depth is, I would still say, is maybe a concern. If it was me, I'd still like another striker in, because I think if Havertz doesn't find that form, or like we say, if he does get a knock, I'm not sure what Plan B is going to be.
Yeah, and especially rumours are that Eddie Nketiah is leaving for Forest, so that really was their backup striker. So I think they could be in business to do something. The name always mentioned around is Ivan Toney, but I don't see that being the right fit. And the other end of the field, Ramsdale. Rumours that he's heading to Wolves. They have to look to replace him and get a second keeper in. I think they were looking at a young Spanish keeper. But yeah, Ramsdale for me needs to go and play games, and I think he would be a strong asset for a lot of teams in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, like I say, he's a very good goalkeeper just to be sat on the bench. So, yeah.
So are we saying if Arsenal sign a striker, they can get closer to City, or you don't think it really matters?
Well, I think that depends on Kai Havertz. But if it was me, I would still be in the market for a striker, or just adding more depth to what they already have as well.
No, I agree. So the next team on the list, newly into the Champions League, Aston Villa. I personally think they've had a pretty good summer. I think the players they've brought in aren't world beaters, as we've seen in the past when they've signed the likes of like Coutinho and players like that. I think they've strengthened their squad, and I think beyond Pep Guardiola, Unai Emery, I think, is the second best manager in the Premier League in terms of experience and just understanding, just really understanding what it takes to play in Europe and play in the league. I mean, you look at who they've signed. Obviously, they lost Douglas Luiz, which was a big loss for them, but they've then brought in Onana from Everton, which I think he's young and he's going to do well. Scored on his debut at the weekend. Ross Barkley, who I think had a good season with Luton. Cameron Archer as a backup to Ollie Watkins. I'm just trying to look here as well. Like they've signed a couple of young players that I think they're going to be able to bring in. But I just think overall they've had a pretty solid summer season. Maybe one more signing in there. Maybe there's room for another superstar. They've got the lure of the Champions League, right? That Champions League name, come and play for us, and players that want to play in there. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Onana's made a good start. We talked about him a little bit last week about how at times he shows glimpses of being a really good player, but not consistently. So that'll be interesting. I think ultimately, though, I don't think it's as good as you're saying, just because the player that's left is better than any of the players that they brought in. So they've lost Douglas Luiz, and Onana I think is somewhat of a gamble, but they obviously have faith that it's going to come off, and he's certainly made a good start scoring on his debut. People like Cameron Archer, it's something to get excited about for a Champions League level club. I'm not sure. So for me, not that great because I think they've lost one of their best players in Douglas Luiz and not replaced him with anyone of the same level.
Yeah, the one thing on Cameron Archer I would say, I think he's a good youngster, and there's rumours I think he was going to get loaned out straight away, which may have happened. But if that is the case and they've only got Ollie Watkins, yes, Ollie Watkins can on paper guarantee you goals, but as you've said before, injuries can happen, and who's going to replace that if Ollie Watkins is injured, suspended, whatever it might be, with the campaign of the Champions League now being a league phase, 2 extra games. It's going to be a lot to really handle for Aston Villa their first year in. So I can see them maybe one, maybe two more signings before the end of it. Maybe a few loans. I guess they have to watch the PSR rules, and obviously, yes, they would probably expect to be in Champions League year after year now, having got in there, but definitely not guaranteed. So you do have to be careful of those finances.
Yeah, they've got a lot of games to play, so adding some depth I think is important for them.
But Villa, I think overall, I mean, if Emery was my manager, if I was a Villa fan, I would have faith in him and the club. I think Villa have always been kind of smart in the transfer window. They've never really overspent, and they've always had a strategy about it. And I think bringing in a few youngsters on top of the squad that they already have. The interesting one that I thought though was one of the outgoings. Yes, they had Douglas Luiz, but the Moussa Diaby coming in obviously the other year. And I thought he had a really good season with Aston Villa. So to let him go to Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia, I thought was interesting. But again, maybe it's balancing the books.
Yeah, I think that is a loss as well. I think he was a good player for them. So yeah, that even I know you keep saying that they've had a decent window, but for me, losing Diaby as well as Douglas Luiz, I think I'd be concerned about losing your better players, starters, and not necessarily replacing them with the same level.
It's a bit like what you say about Brighton, right? Like they've lost their best players, and have they really replaced them? But obviously, we'll get on to to Brighton soon. But yeah, we'll
Yeah, and
see.
maybe it goes back to having such a good manager that you've got faith in them just to produce the next ones.
Yeah. So that leads us on then to Bournemouth. Obviously, they've lost Solanke, which I think is going to be pretty big for them, but they have replaced him with, I think, well, this is only for my football manager knowledge, but Ivan Ilson from Porto,
Right.
some Brazilian name that I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Um, but looking at his stats last year for Porto, 25 goals in 42 games. Not a bad return at a high level of Porto. And for Bournemouth to be able to sign that player, I think it was a club record deal as well. Like fair play to Bournemouth, and I think the managers had a lot of say there, like pulling that style of player in.
Yeah, I think that's a big coup for them. I think it'll be interesting to see, obviously, anytime someone comes from, say, the Portuguese league or anything like that, how they adapt to the Premier League. But they've lost goals, but when you look at that record, hopefully they've replaced the goals as well, which is important.
Yeah, we said that they might be maybe struggling a little bit in the Premier League last week. And I'm looking at, in order to stay up in the Premier League, you need to have somebody score. And I think Solanke was there, obviously saving grace last year of keeping them up. Is this new striker going to come in, hit the ground running, and get goals? It's hard to say. I'm just like looking through now at other transfers they brought in. The other one is Luis Sinistera from Leeds United. Um, I think he had a good season with Leeds last year. I think at Bournemouth, you have to look at the teams that do well in the Championship that don't go up and try and sneak them in and say, look, come play in the Premier League. You just missed out on play. And I think he had a good year with Leeds United. Um, but yeah, I think Bournemouth to finish out the last week, I think they just need a little bit more. Depending on how much money they really got for Solanke, can they go and spend that a little bit? I know they've just bought the new striker, but is there maybe a little bit more left in the budget to get one or two more signings just to shore them up? And I think the manager's taken on a squad originally from Eddie Howe, and then obviously they've had a couple of managers in between that. And is he now trying to bring in players to his own identity? Like they brought in a young lad from Barcelona, they brought in a couple of other foreigners, so maybe he's trying to mould it to his liking.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be a case of, in terms of the transfers, seeing if the replacement is able to replace the goals that Solanke scored for them. Ultimately, that's what's going to decide whether they get drawn into that relegation battle or not.
Yeah, we'll see. Moving then on to Brentford. I think the big talking point that we need to discuss here is, come the end of the window, is Ivan Toney going to be there? Latest rumours are there's a move on the cards to Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
It's funny because I saw an interview of his recently, and it was referred back to March, and he was talking about, oh, Brentford would do well if I got 50 million and moved to Madrid. I'm sorry, but moving to Madrid and moving to Saudi Arabia is two different complete ends of the spectrum.
Well,
I
it's not for
think,
Brentford because ultimately, if 50 million goes in their pocket, it doesn't really matter where Ivan Toney ends up. Makes no difference to them. Obviously, it makes a big difference to Ivan Toney in his career. I'd be disappointed if he went, to Saudi. I think there's teams in the Premier League that could do with him definitely, and they would score goals in. So it'd be disappointing if that's where he ended up. Obviously, he got left out the first game of the season, which might tell you a little bit. But yeah, I would hope he stays in the Premier League, if not in Europe.
so. If you're Ivan Toney's agent, which club are you knocking on the door of saying, come sign my client?
Well, probably one of the Saudi clubs because that's how agents work. They want to get as much money for themselves as well. So,
Right, but Premier League, who would Ivan Toney suit in the Premier League, in your opinion?
well, we just talked about Arsenal needing a striker. I think Ivan Toney linking up in that team would be a good thing. I think they're not the only team. I mean, obviously Xerxes had a good start for Man United. I don't know if he's going to be the big answer, but I think Man United fans would love Toney in the team. Um, honestly, it's probably more a case of who wouldn't want him in the Premier League than who would want him.
In your opinion, would he fit into being the backup striker at City? They've just lost Julian Alvarez. Could he go in there and be behind Haaland and play in that system?
Yeah, obviously they moved Alvarez on, so they don't really have that second striker. So potentially, um, yeah, I think it would be one of those where he would have to learn and play a very specific role, and Pep would teach him a very specific role that he wants him to play. Whether you know, whether he wants to be a backup or whether he wants to be the main man is another question.
I would love it though if he turned into another Odin Wingy and just turned up deadline day at different clubs, just open to get signed.
Yeah, I don't, and I didn't realize has he publicly said that he wants to leave, that he wants to get out of there? I mean, I'm sure there's more money elsewhere, um, but I don't remember seeing him saying that he definitely wants to leave. I think he said in the past that it would be good for the club to get some money out of the deal for him.
Yeah, I guess there's always two sides to the story, right? But if I'm Brentford, if that is the case and you think you can make some money and let him move on, you've got to do it. You've got to do it now, so then you've got enough time to go and sign a replacement because they're going to need a replacement in there so they're scoring enough goals.
Yeah, we spoke about that last week, right? The closer this gets to deadline day, and you haven't sold him, and then you sold him last second, you're not able to spend the money. But they weren't obviously they did well at the weekend without him. So
We'll see. I think that's going to be one to watch. Definitely. I personally don't think Ivan Toney is going to be at Brentford come September. I think he's going to move on, whether it's Premier League or somewhere else.
all the signs suggest that, but I think people have been talking about that for the last year, and he's still there. So we'll see.
We shall see. So this next team we're going to discuss in Brighton, I think they've done a typical Brighton transfer window. They've signed players that we may not have heard before from around Europe, but come December, January, we're going to be talking about them. Like, for example, Mitoma the other year. Nobody had heard about him, and then all of a sudden, everyone is on everyone's lips talking. I think they've made a few signings that, again, like I'm looking here, Brajan Gruda from Mainz in Germany. They've made somebody from Sweden, from Gothenburg, from Feyenoord. Like, I think I think they've done what Brighton typically do, and they look at the resale value. I think Brighton, and I think that's their strategy.
Yeah, the best part of this episode is definitely listening to you pronounce some of these names. Um, but yeah, I think you have to trust that they know what they're doing because they've done it in the past and they've got a track record of finding these players and then them doing a great job in the Premier League. So you have to they've earned that trust, I guess. Um, I've said it a few times, if I was a Brighton fan, I'd still be concerned that, constantly selling the best players and then having to replace them and putting yourself in a situation where you need to find these replacements. Um, but they've done it in the past, so why not again?
It's interesting as well because they've just forked out their club record deal, 40 million for Jorginho Ruta from Leeds, and I thought he was okay
Mm.
for Leeds, but to break your club record transfer, I don't know. I just again maybe it's one of those that he's going to turn into a superstar and he's going to end up at a Chelsea, a Tottenham, whatever it might be from Brighton, but. I don't know. I don't know enough about him. Maybe your knowledge of the championship, if you know anything about him.
No, I mean obviously he's a good player. And maybe, yeah, Brighton have probably just seen something where they're like, we'll develop him, and then he's either going to be a first team player for a long period of time, or we're going to move him on and make a profit. Again, it's a lot of money for someone playing in that division, would be the question mark. But I think Leeds will be happy.
I was going to say
They've got
Leeds
money to
have sold a
spend.
couple of players. They must have a good bank balance now.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't had a great start, and they've started the championship with 2 draws. So, um, yeah, they need to reinvest that money if they're going to make a push to win the league again this year.
Yeah, we'll see with Brighton. I think they're obviously I ruled them out a little bit in the last episode, but they come in and it was a great first win against Everton, albeit it was Everton who a breeze would have pushed past them. But we'll see. I think Brighton could go either way, and we'll see what they've come up with in the last week. Then that leads us on to probably the busiest team of transfer history in Chelsea. And I think this is definitely going to be an interesting one because I think for this one, it's not a case of talking about who's coming in, it's talking about who they're going to get rid of because they're going to have to trim that squad down.
Yeah, has Yao Felix been confirmed as well?
I think Fabrizio has given the here we go on João Felix,
Yeah.
so he's coming in, and the two latest at the moment, the managers come out and said Sterling and Chilwell, you're not in the squad, you're not going to play a single minute.
Mm.
Ben Chilwell and Sterling, two senior players on that team, now starting to think, right, now I've got to find another club.
Yeah, I mean, I saw something this morning about Chilwell being offered to Man United. Obviously, they have issues with the left back, but obviously their issues at left back is that their left back keeps getting injured. So I'm not sure Chilwell's the replacement for that. Yeah, they're going to have to get some out of the door, aren't they? I don't think they can even all fit in the changing room at this point. But Sterling and Chilwell are still Premier League quality players, so I'm sure there's be some takers for them, and if they're trying to force them out, there'll probably be some good prices going as well.
But I think the issue is the high wages they're probably on at Chelsea. That if you're looking at, say, these players they're trying to ship out are probably going to be looking at mid-table to bottom half of the league in terms of who's going to sign them. They're not going to be able to afford the wages. So it's exactly the same problem Man United have had for years. United have tried getting rid of players, but no club can afford their wages. So these players are happy probably just sitting in the reserves, picking up 100 grand plus. Why would you move for 40 grand if you're already making 100 grand? You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe Chilwell looks at it and goes like, "I'll take a cut and go back to Leicester, where he started, and play in the Premier League for them." That'd be kind of a cool little reconnection. But obviously the wages, I don't know what he's on now. Like you say, over 100 grand a week. I'm sure we'll have to get slashed for that to happen. Sterling, would an Arsenal be interested? I feel like he could fit in at Arsenal. I don't necessarily think they have to go to like a lower half of the league table. I think there's still some good clubs that would be interested in Sterling and Chilwell.
Yeah,
Maybe not at the salaries they're on at Chelsea, but I do think there'll be some good clubs interested in them.
maybe they'll look overseas potentially and look for a move there that might be able to support their wages. But when we talk about incomings at Chelsea, I'll give him credit for one of their signings. Pedro Neto, I think, is an unbelievable player. I
Yeah.
kind of wish United had looked at him a little bit. I know he was linked with Liverpool in the past, but I think they've done really well in getting him in. And I think he's going to come on leaps and bounds and have a solid season or a solid career at Chelsea on his 12-year contract. But the other incoming that baffled me a little bit because I don't see the quality there was Dewsbury Hall. Obviously, the manager had
Mm.
him at Leicester last year, but for me, he's a poor man's version of Conor Gallagher. I think Conor Gallagher gives more, and then you've got Caicedo, Lavia, you've got Enzo Fernandez, all these players that are going to play in each position. Yes, we talk about squad depth, but I don't know. I just don't understand that one.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit of a strange one where it's just the coach want to try and put his stamp on things. But maybe he's seen something that he likes. Um, that midfield area is definitely the one area where this is an abundance of quality. You mentioned those three with Lavia, Caicedo, and Enzo Fernandez. I'm a big Enzo Fernandez fan, but I think like the weekend he was almost playing like a number 10, and I still think that's where he should be playing. So interesting. I think, like you say, the Neves deal is definitely a good one. He's always had injuries, which have kind of hampered him, but he's a great player. I think that'll be a really good signing as well.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to balance these books. If they can't ship players out, I think they could be in trouble, especially if they don't make Champions League this year.
Yeah, and it's not just Sterling and Chilwell. There's others too that they need to be pushing. And the other thing too is like, are they willing to take a loss on some of these signings that they've made? Or that's obviously a hard thing to do when you're spending 60, 70, 80 million on people and you're selling them on for 30 million. It's a kind of a kick in the teeth. But I think they're going to have to do a little bit of that, I think.
Crystal Palace. I think this is an interesting one. Obviously, they lost a superstar in Michael Elise to Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
Made a good bit of change on him, to be fair. But I think it was today or the other day it was confirmed Anderson, their centre half, is going to Fulham, which I think is a big loss for them because as well as that, Mark Gay is being linked with Newcastle.
Mm.
And you look at Crystal Palace last year, one of the better teams towards the end of the season of keeping a clean sheet. They're going to have to look for a replacement. They're linked with a youngster at Benfica, but again, I think for Crystal Palace to be successful, if you're losing both those centre backs, yes, it's fine bringing in a youngster who could potentially be good in a year, 2 years' time. But for me, they've got to sign a proven Premier League centre defender to shore them up. Somebody you know can come in straight away and hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's tough losing both centre backs if that does happen. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet. I mean, the transfer window closed and they could have kept Matt Gay and could have kept Adam Wharton. And then you're looking at, well, you've done really well there to keep two really top promising players. So I think it's hard to judge Palace right now because I think it depends on if some of those deals go through or they don't.
Yeah, the one question mark I have is like the ownership of it. The ownership of, or the fans have always looked at the ownership as like obviously they saved the club many years ago when it was in administration, but they've almost played it safe, I think, in a lot of these transfer windows, and they've sold Elise for big money. You would like to think that Mark Gay, Eze, if they were to leave, it would be for a good fee. So you're looking at them bringing in potentially over 100 million, and then go and invest it, go reinvest it. And I know they're talking about building on their stadium, but I think for Palace to progress, they need to give Glasner a little bit of money to spend. And they've tried replacing Elise with Ismail Assar, the lad that was at Watford and then moved
Mm.
to, I think, Marseille. And Kamada from Lazio, I watched their game at the weekend and he looked pretty tidy. But I think Crystal Palace could be busy in the last week.
Yeah, and Sarr was, when he was at Watford, was a really good player, and I think there's a lot of people interested in him. But again, I think Crystal Palace right now it's a question mark. It's do they keep hold of some of their best players, which right now they have, but obviously a lot of rumours going around that people might potentially move. And then if they do lose them, do they have time to bring in replacements, or are they willing to spend the money to bring in replacements?
Yeah, it could either be, or you almost want it to be really quiet and you don't sell anyone, right? And you keep your players and you just go about your business, or you want it to be pretty busy, you quickly sell your players and you bring new players in. So I think it could be, it's not going to be middle, it's going to be either end of the scale for them.
Yeah, if this was a market stall, if I was Crystal Palace, I'd just be keeping my head down, trying not engaging with anyone, making sure that no one's coming up and asking how much Matt Gay is going to cost or Adam Waller is going to cost or people like this. And the midfielder too, the Eze. So keep hold of Eze as well. So yeah, no business in or out might be a good thing for Palace.
Keep quiet, Crystal Palace fans, keep quiet. Everton, I think they need a lot of work. Um, I'm looking at who they've signed. They've brought Jack Harrison back in, a couple of youngsters, one from Napoli. I think Sean Dyche needs to spend a little bit, but the question mark I think is who owns Everton? They obviously tried getting that 777 group in recently. That folded. They're looking at other ownership groups. I don't know if Everton are coming or going. And yes, they've got the new stadium next year. Last year at Goodison Park. Maybe they haven't got any money to spend. Obviously with the point deduction recently, and maybe Sean Dyche. That's the reason they brought him in because he's good at dealing with a squad with no budget. You look at Burnley. Maybe there is no budget there for them to spend.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because at the same time, Sean Dyche seems like the kind of person that would be kind of vocal about needing to bring players in to try and kind of twist the arm of the boardroom and get some money to spend. So maybe it's just not there. Maybe they've had that conversation. Obviously, right now they've kept hold of Branthwaite, and if they manage to do that, obviously that'll be a big plus for them for the rest of the season. Or would they prefer to sell him and be able to bring in maybe 2, possibly even 3 players with the money that they get out of that deal. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because United were bidding for him at the start of the summer window and they kept rejecting it. So maybe a little bit like Crystal Palace, can you keep your better players like that? And think about it, that's a successful window. But if you don't sell him now, you're selling him next year, and it's not going to be for as much as it is now. So do you hold on? Do you gamble? It's hard to say, but I think the lack of activity could come back to haunt Everton come the end of the season.
Yeah. When you look at the squad, it's not inspiring, is it? That's for sure.
No, but we'll see. Fulham, I think Fulham have been one of the front runners of the window. I think they've had some good business. Obviously, their biggest outgoing was Paulinho, who went to Munich, finally got his move, and they've had to look to replace him. I don't think they've quite replaced him in his position, but the other signings that they've made, I mean, Emil Smith-Rowe, I think, is a fantastic signing
Mm.
for them. Didn't quite have the greatest game in the first week against United, but he showed his potential at Arsenal years ago, and I think this is the perfect move for him to go and re-show the world what he can do. And the likes of him, Andreas Pereira linking up, I think could be really good.
Yeah, a little bit of creativity in the midfield for sure. And, I think Adama Traore showed how he can be a handful. My concern would be, where the goal's going to come from. Um, but yeah, I think they look strong in midfield and even at the back. I'm a big fan of Robinson. I think he's a really good fullback. Um, but yeah, just where the goal's going to come from. And again, I think we saw that against them in the Man United game, right? They had opportunities, whether they were chances or almost like opportunities to create really good chances that he didn't take advantage of. Um, so yeah, that would be my worry for them is how they're going to score enough goals to really push themselves up the table.
Yeah, like you mentioned there, like Adama Traore, he's fast, but apart from that, what else does he give you?
Yeah, well, I think that's been said about him for a while, and it is what it is at this point because he got himself in really good positions and his end product was just very, very poor. I'm sure he's working on it and it might get better.
And he in the back garden, he's kicking the ball into his goal.
But the problem is we've never ran that fast, so we don't know what it feels like to then have to cross a ball whilst running at a million miles an hour. So it's hard to kind of be too judgmental on it. But
Mate, I'm rapid.
yeah.
But the two rumours at the moment, obviously we spoke earlier, Anderson from Palace coming in as a centre back, um, and it's also been mentioned that Sander Berg, the Burnley centre mid,
Mm.
could be coming in. Is that potentially a direct replacement for Paulinho? Potentially, and I think when he came into Sheffield United, he was looked at as like an up and coming youngster, promising, and didn't quite live up to the hype. So maybe under Marco Silva, he can get the best out of him. And I think Marco Silva is a steady manager that, again, is going to keep Fulham around the mid-table level.
Yeah, it seems like they're almost setting up to be really kind of solid and compact and hard to beat rather than maybe kind of going out to score a lot of goals and win games that way. So
Yeah. So the newbies to the league, Ipswich. It seems like they were quite quiet at the start of the window, and by quiet, I mean, they were probably just re-signing those loan players that they had last year, Amari Hutchinson, and a few other players that they had on loan that they've now brought in. All of a sudden, recently, I feel like they've just gone bang, bang, bang and brought in loads of players, and I think some really good players. You all know him, the lad from Blackburn, Sam Smodic.
yeah.
Wasn't he the championship top goal scorer last year? And I think that would do really well for Ipswich.
Yeah, I can't remember if he was top. I know he's got a lot of goals for them. He's been around being a good player for a long time now. In the champion in those kind of leagues. I think they kind of bought players with one eye on the championship would be my only not a concern 'cause I think it's sensible, but they've definitely building a squad where if they do go down, people like him, people like the Delap from Man City, kind of young players like that that when they go if they go, hopefully not, 'cause I'd like them to stay up. But if they do go down, um, they're in a good position to kind of come straight back up or compete in the next 2 to 3 years to come back up.
Is this the right move for Calvin Phillips to reignite his career?
Well, he needs to do something, right? He needs to change. I think there's probably other clubs that he could have gone to that you would argue are going to be a better team. But maybe that's part of the thing he likes is the fact that he's going to go there and be in the starting lineup every week, or at least he would like to hope that he'd be in the starting lineup. Obviously, take nothing for granted.
Yeah, I think if we were to give Ipswich a grade, I think you're looking at like the B plus towards an A because, like you said, they've brought in some good players that are going to hopefully help them this year, but also if they do go down, hopefully bring them straight back up. Um, but then another new team to the league, Leicester. I'm nervous for Leicester because I don't think they've brought in the enough quality. I think they're very similar to Ipswich. They brought in a couple of players that if they go down are going to just help them steady the ship.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue is the gap between the Championship and the Premier League seems to be getting bigger and bigger all the time, and then these teams see it as, for us to really splash the cash as a risk because ultimately, even with the parachute payments, you get people on big money, you go down, and you are in a tough situation. So I think that everyone's always going to be a little bit apprehensive about going big and trying to spend a lot of money to stay up. But that being said, I think their squad was already originally in a better place than Ipswich. So maybe that's why they've done a little bit less dealing. Obviously, I think they're going to rely heavily on Jamie Vardy's experience and goal scoring ability. Um, and I think apart from that, it's about for them kind of making themselves very solid and defensively as strong as possible.
Yeah, I think they need to bring in another attacking player, as you mentioned, and like Jamie Vardy can score goals, but he's getting old on the clock, so maybe somebody else to compete with him and help him out. And then the next club that brings us to is a very, very quiet club called Liverpool. Um, no signings, but they have some big problems on their hands. And by big problems, I mean contract renewals. Salah, Van Dijk, Trent are all out of contract this time next year. That has to be sorted for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think that's probably more important than kind of any transfers coming in, really. I mean, if you look at their squad, they've got enough players of really high quality where you would say if no one leaves and no one comes in, then they're going to be okay. I think they've been looking for that defensive midfielder. So I'm sure they would love to get that player in if they have someone who they think is suitable. But ultimately, probably the first priority, like you say, is getting those contracts sorted. I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Are any of those going to be an issue?
I mean, if Liverpool aren't if Liverpool aren't doing anything on Arnie Slot this year and they're struggling, if you're a Trent and you've got say potentially a Real Madrid coming in for you, because I think he's capable of playing at that level. Danny Carvajal maybe coming to the end of his career. Let's go sign Trent. If you're Trent, yes, you're a scouser and you want to play for Liverpool, but do you want to go guarantee at the end of your career you're looking back picking up Champions League, league titles, competing for the best when Liverpool might not be doing that every season? So I can see Trent one maybe being a little bit difficult. I think Salah has got one eye on the door. A big money move to Saudi Arabia, go earn some money. Van Dijk I can see staying. I see him just seeing out his career at Liverpool.
Yeah, interesting. I could definitely see Salah at the end of the year. Um, yeah, like you say, maybe going over there, collecting a big paycheck. I think Alexander Arnold, the only one that would, I think whether it be Madrid or Barca, someone like that came in for him. I don't think he's going anywhere else in the Premier League. I think it would just be those two clubs really that would potentially draw his eye. And then Van Dijk, yeah, I mean, does he want to do something similar to Salah? Does he want to? I feel like I know he's getting a little bit older, but I think there'd be a lot of clubs all around the world interested in him if he wanted to leave. Could see him at like a Bayern Munich. You could see him in a Barcelona shirt. But yeah, I mean, definitely needs to be sorted out soon. I think for Liverpool.
Arnie Slot came out and said the Real Sociedad centre mid was his only target and that's all he wanted, and they turned him down. So, or the player turned Liverpool down. So, maybe it's going to be a quiet end to the window for Liverpool, but I'm sure Liverpool fans hope that a few bits of business take place. Another quiet team, or so to speak, they were quiet to start with, was City, but today they've announced the re-signing of Gundogan, and I think that is a very good piece of business considering it's a free transfer.
Yeah, good signing. Obviously, Oscar Bob went down after you tipped
Yeah,
him to be the one to watch.
I got killed
Uh,
there, didn't I?
he's going to be out for a while. So just bringing in another top midfielder is and interestingly, even last week we talked about all these kind of midfield players that they have, and then Kovacic is one that we didn't talk about, and he goes on and scores a great goal at the weekend. So um, yeah, lots of options in midfield and in those attacking positions. The only one, like you mentioned, is do they need a replacement for Haaland if he was to go down? Do they need a backup to him? I'm not sure they do, but that would be the only kind of area that they might be interested in doing some business.
But I think that's why they've signed Gundogan, because if you think about his last season at City, he chipped in with a lot of goals. So if Haaland doesn't play, I think they just push their attacking players further up, and that's where he fits in to provide a little bit more stockiness in the midfield and chipping in with those goals. You look at Arsenal, their goals come from the midfield, and Pep would probably look to do something similar if Haaland was to be ruled out.
Yeah, I think that is probably what he will be doing. I don't really see him bringing in another striker, but maybe they still have the money to do it.
So then the neighbours across in Manchester, Man United. Um, my personal feeling is we've made some good signings. Have we made some great signings? I'm not sure. The lad from PSG is rumoured to be coming in potentially on a loan with obligation to buy it, Ugarte, the Uruguayan centre mid, and I think he could turn Man United's transfer window from okay to good. Because I mean I saw him at the Copa America and I really liked him, a Casemiro replacement. But the big question mark for me is Luke Shaw can't stay fit for more than a couple of hours. Malacia, God knows where he even is.
Yeah.
Harry Armas, yes, he has potential, but he's 17 years old. So for me, after this signing, we have to look at a left back. But the rumours of Marcus Alonso and Ben Chilwell, for me, that doesn't do it for me because they're just as injury prone as the rest of them.
Yeah, it's almost like you get them when you hope that they're injured at different times or something. I mean, I thought Mazraoui, the new fullback, I thought had a really good start to the season. He looks like a good player. With him and Dallo, you can just about cover it, but obviously they're not going to play every game of the season. I agree that getting Ugarte in does turn it into a good window, but I think the other thing that turns it into a good window for Man United is getting rid of some players. And some players are, like you say, are on big money, so it's hard to get rid of them. But surely, you got to get rid of if they get Maguire out or Lindelof, one of those two out. Let McTominay go, Ericsson, Hannibal, Palestri, Sancho. Is Sancho going to pick up 200 grand a week or whatever he's sat on and not play, or can you get him out the door? So I think as important as it is to get Ugarte and maybe someone else to rotate in at fullback in, I think there's 4 or 5 players that you need to get out.
Yeah, but I think that is United's issue is they can't get him out because of the wages. Like McTominay's probably on 100 grand plus, and yes, he got linked with Fulham, but they could probably get Sander Berg cheaper on a lower wage, so they're going to go for that idea. And Napoli were interested in Scott McTominay, but they can't afford the package. Dortmund wanted Sancho, couldn't afford his wages, so United have shot themselves in the foot by giving all these wages to players who are poor, and they can't get rid of them now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think McTominay is a good example. So my guess is his wages are slightly lower, but someone like Sancho for sure that is an issue. Someone like Lindelof for sure. Like if Lindelof's on 120 grand a week, I don't think anyone else out there is going to pay him that money. So
Yeah.
maybe they can do a deal where they still chip in part of the wage for the first year or two, but definitely they need to get some people out.
Yeah, the next one's an interesting one as well with Newcastle, another team that I think's been fairly quiet, and I think the neutral fan were expecting Newcastle in the last couple of years to blow it out the water and sign your Neymars and all of these big fancy players, but I guess PSR rules have really hit them, and they're going to have to be strategic in who they're signing. I mean, you look at who they've brought in, like Lewis Hall, they've signed back now permanently, loan last year. John Ruddy as a backup goalkeeper. Like, none of these signings are really going to wow the Newcastle fans. And I'm nervous about Newcastle fans potentially turning on the owners a little bit and wanting more from him and wanting more money. But I think they're just under very strong restrictions.
Yeah, I think they've got to figure out how can they, they don't want to spend all the money that they have to spend because it's a ridiculous amount. But like, how can they work something out where they're able to actually bring in some players a little bit more freely than they are doing right now, maybe over a number of years. So um, I think they're fine. I think, Tonali coming back in a few weeks is almost like a new signing.
Yeah, I agree.
So that'll be a big plus for them. But it's going to be interesting for sure with them. I think their season could go either way. I think they could really push on and compete for top four, but I could also see them dropping out of the top eight as well. So it's going to be an interesting one.
And if they do drop out the following year, then you're looking at struggling even more to bring players in because a team like Newcastle need to be in Europe and bringing in some big players because Newcastle are a big, big club and I would like to see them pushing up higher up the league, but I think they need a few stronger players in that team. But I agree with your point in the Tonali one. I think him coming back in very soon, I think is going to give them that lift to get going again. But also, as a few other teams, Bruno Guimaraes, I think him staying because he was linked away is like a new sign. Like you keeping these strong players, Isak and players like that, keeping them around is good for Newcastle.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're keeping hold of, like you said, Isak, Anthony Gordon, good stuff there, keeping hold of the better players. I guess that's what you got to do if you can't really bring in the big improvements. The minimum for a club like that is to make sure they're keeping hold of their best.
But then moving on then to Forest. Forest probably compared to other windows, probably one of their more quieter windows.
Yeah, I mean they've had some busy ones in the past for sure. So maybe just trying to settle things down a little bit and consolidate. Um, maybe if you're a Forest fan, you're probably a little bit disappointed they haven't made that one signing. Now they're a bit more established in the league. That's gonna help them kind of just push away from that relegation area. I don't think they've made that signing, so um, that's why I probably have them tipped a little bit to be struggling this year.
Yeah, the one signing that I do like that they've made is Elliot Anderson from Newcastle. I think when he played for Newcastle, and I was fortunate enough last pre-season to watch Newcastle Brighton out here in the US, and I liked him. I think he's a good player, versatile, can play on the left, the right, and through the middle. I think he could be good for Forest, and I'm going to give a shout as well. A player that I always enjoyed watching many years ago, and Tim Cahill. His son has just signed for Forest, Shay Cahill from Brisbane Roar. So be interesting to see if he makes his debut for Forest anytime soon. But yeah, Forest have finally calmed down. Maybe the funds are starting to run out potentially.
Maybe.
Um, Southampton, a team that has been promoted. Have they done enough, Jack, to stay up?
Well, I think in my predictions, I did predict that they would just stay up. I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with great stuff they're doing in the transfer market. Just the feeling I had. I think they're going to get things playing well together and be able to do it and push on a little bit and pick up enough points. They got a little bit of experience in there with people like Walker Peters, for example. But yeah, I mean, any team that gets promoted, the fans are always hoping to see, some moves being made that gives them hope for to staying up the next year.
Yeah, and another experienced player that's returning back to the Saints is Adam Lallana. I know he's
Yeah,
obviously getting on a little bit, and he was almost a player coach at Brighton. I think him coming in with the Premier League experience could be a light for Southampton fans and helping the younger players out because they've also signed some young players. I mean, Flynn Downs from West Ham was looked at as a prospect at West Ham, and then another player to your point of the lower league specials, Ronnie Edwards was at Peterborough, and not many people would have heard of him, but he was in the England youngster squad that had a very good campaign, and I think he's an up-and-coming centre-back that you're going to hear more and more about as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think I have hope for them. I do have hope for them. I think, like I said, there's little bits of experience like a Lallana, and like could Lallana be similar to Ross Barkley was at Luton last year? He had a great season there, so that's what I think they'll be hoping to replicate.
Um, Tottenham, I've got down here in my notes, Tottenham's first 11 is strong, but I think outside of that, it starts going on a downward slope, and my worry is the style of play that he has, where it's quite intense. Are they going to pick up some knocks? I think the Solanke signing could be, for me, one of the signings of the season. I think against Leicester, he had some good few chances. Now it's a case of taking those chances. I've pipped him to be one of the top goal scorers of the Premier League, so I think that's a fantastic signing. Is it a replacement for Harry Kane? We'll see. But the only other player that I think they've brought in that is a potential is the Archie Gray from Leeds.
Hmm. Yeah, I think he will become a good player. Actually, there's obviously a lot of hype around him, and he got on. He played in the first game, did fine, but I don't think he's going to be one of those players that kind of is a creative genius or anything like that. I think he is the guy that's going to keep them ticking. Um, but I think that I would rather see like two players like that come in. Gray and Solanke is going to start every week. Gray's a young player, but he's going to actually impact on the field. Um, so yeah, I think two good signings there, and also getting Skip out the door for good money too. So like we say, it's not just about what goes in, but what goes out too.
Yeah, I still think Spurs are in the market for maybe one or two more players. I think they could pop up last minute with a decent player coming in. But I think if Spurs, as my prediction, getting into the top four, I think if they're going to guarantee that, I just look at their game against Leicester and when they're bringing some players on, and I'm like, maybe the first one or two subs were strong, but then after that, is it strong enough? And I think they need a couple more players just to reinforce the squad and guarantee you're competing at the highest level. But
Yeah,
then
I mean, you look at their squad though, and even in those attacking positions, when you got like Son, you got Kulusevski, you got Timo Werner, like there's players there.
Timo Werner might be one of the worst attacking players in the Premier League. He's a German version of Adama Traore. He can just run fast, but he can't finish, and his touch is like a donkey.
All right, let's move on then.
Well, the next team for me, a bit of a bold shout, but I think they've been probably one of the best teams that has um, really bought very well in this transfer window. West Ham United, I
Mm.
think some of their business has been terrific. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Todibo, the lad from Nice, Fulkrug, the guy from Borussia Dortmund, Max Kilman from Wolves. I think these are all fantastic signings. And I can see West Ham buying maybe one or two. I think the owners are going to back the new manager because the fans are crying out for a new style. They want more. They want more. So I think they're going to back the manager with an open checkbook, and it seems like he's using it.
Yeah, I think they've definitely made maybe the best transfer window out of all the clubs in the Premier League. Maybe West Ham. I do think Fulkrug, how do you say his name to you? That guy. Uh,
Fulkrug, yeah, we're definitely
yeah,
butchering the names on this episode.
yeah, but I do think that'll be an interesting one. So I think that one could go either way. I'm not sold on that one yet, but hopefully he gets a decent run in the team and can show what he can do. But I do think some of the other good signings are very good. You look at their squad; they're certainly they got talent there for sure. And important, like we say too, they kept hold of their better players. They kept hold of Jared Bowen, got him on a new deal. They got they kept Paqueta, which I think a lot of clubs would have been interested in. So. Very good transfer window for West Ham, I think.
Yeah, and my only reservation potential would be that we've spoken about teams like this in the past that on paper a very good transfer window, but then 6 months down the line, those players haven't lived up to the hype. But we'll see. Well, I think West Ham have done well, and I think there's an interesting future ahead. So then, last but not least, Wolverhampton Wanderers. It's kind of a good thing we've left them to last because they haven't really done too much. I think the one good signing for them is the youngster Tommy Doyle from City. I think he's
Mm.
a good signing for them, but I think well, the big thing Wolves have to do now is replace Pedro Neto, and he was a big player for them who had an amazing attacking output for them. So go sign the next Neto. They're almost Wolves for me are a team that sign a player from overseas. He has one or two good seasons and then they move him on. A little bit like a Brighton, like they find these hidden gems and then move them on for a bit of profit.
Yeah, they're gonna have to keep finding them, I think, because obviously they lost Pedro Neto, but the year before that, obviously they lost Matheus Nunes, so they are getting in the habit of losing those better players each year. So they got to keep finding the next one.
So yeah, I think Wolves will be fine, and I think you might see them maybe use that money from Pedro Neto, depending on the financial stability of the club. You'd like to think as a Wolves fan they're going to reinvest that money, but I think in today's market, it's very hard to find a player of value less than 30, 40 million that is going to give you a guaranteed success. I feel like it's so overflated with just price tags that are extraordinary prices. I think
Yeah,
teams like Wolves get priced out of some of these moves.
yeah, and also there's plenty of people who have been bought for more than 30 or 40 million that haven't been great either.
Yeah.
You as a Man United fan know that more than anyone.
Yep, I certainly do. And obviously, this podcast is coming out on a Friday with 1 week to go of the window. So it'll be interesting to see when we release the next episode how these teams are shaping up. And I think it's going to be an interesting week. And I think it'd be interesting to see if listeners agree or disagree with some of our predictions and perspectives on the transfers. But I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting final week of the season, or the transfer window, should I say?
Yeah, it's hopefully I'm hoping for like an action-packed final couple of days when it comes down to the wire.
Let's hope so. Let's really hope so. But before we do wrap up this episode, obviously you gave me the question at the start, and I've been racking my brains, and I think I've got four, maybe five. I don't think I've got the full seven, but just for the listeners, if you can repeat that question.
Yeah, 7 players have scored 7 goals or more on the opening weekends of the Premier League. Can you name those 7 players?
So the first two that came to mind, obviously the guy that broke the record last weekend, Salah,
Yeah, he scored on 9 different weekends.
and I believe he overtook Alan Shearer.
Alan Shearer has eight different opening weekends he scored on.
Okay. And then it starts turning into a little bit of a educated guess, but I'm going to go longevity in his goal scoring record. Aguero.
Correct. Aguero scored 7 goals on the opening weekends.
But then my next one, another educated guess I've wrote down here. He goes by the name Wayne Rooney.
Correct. 8.
Oof. Okay, so I've got a few listed down next to me that I think could be, I don't know, I could struggle here. My next one would be just because of, again, his goal scoring records and him being a mainstay in the team for so long. Bit of a bold shout here, and it could be Frank Lampard.
Yeah, correct. 8 goals on opening
Oh,
weekends.
and then after it, now I'm struggling.
You got two
I'm just
more, two
thinking of
more to get.
I'm thinking of strikers that had a long time in the Premier League and scored a bucket load of goals.
Mm.
Um,
One
leaning
of
towards
them,
like
one of them scored this weekend, this opening weekend.
he wasn't in the Premier League that long, but he scored a good load of goals. Jamie Vardy?
Correct.
No way. He's done it
Yeah.
that many. I thought he would just be there or thereabout. All right, fair enough. And then my last guess is the only other note I've wrote down here, Andy Cole.
No, so the last person who scored 7 goals or more on the opening weekends is Teddy Sheringham.
Oh, I'll tell you what though, I'm pretty proud of some of my answers there. The Jamie Vardy one was a complete guess, and Lampard was just a hit in hope. But no, I'm pretty proud of how I did there.
Yeah, he did all right there.
Not bad, not bad. But so this episode was obviously a lot about transfer windows. Jack, any final words before we wrap up?
Just that I'm hoping for an action-packed end of the transfer window. It's always entertaining, and maybe we'll see some big mini moves.
Yeah. Fingers crossed for millions and millions of pounds to be spent in the final weeks, and will be interesting to see how we get on in a week's time. But with that being said, we bid you a farewell and enjoy your weekends.